All right, take you at a leg lift. Okay. You're moving more down than forward, so we got to keep good forward momentum. You can get to point two where you'll start leaning too far back, so it actually counters your momentum, right? If I'm trying to keep the center of mass moving forward, but I lean against it, right? That's what can kill your momentum. So for every inch, it looks like your hip went forward, your trunk went back. So you do want to keep it back, but you want to start getting that forward momentum building, and you don't want to counter that. So you got to get that feeling of just moving power, which is what we do with like the med balls really help. The King of the Hill helps. Mm-hmm. So at this point, you're kind of stalled out. I mean, actually, if we go right to the kinematic sequence where we can see the energy, okay. You can see right here, nothing's really moving, right? This is speeds. So you got hip speeds. Basically, the red is the hip speeds, the green is the trunk speeds. And you can see at this point, pretty much it's zero. Not much movement right here, right? Okay. So basically you go into rotation pretty hard right now. We just want to be building up to that. Then you get to the point here where now you start to open. I don't even think you really attempt to drive your lower leg. Your femur starts to turn over. Okay. You hold stability and you keep your weight back, which is good, but there's no real propulsion. So what happens is when you land here and your front leg is that far out, then this is almost extended. So now you have like a lever pushing back against a trunk that has no momentum behind it. So now your trunk's not going to be able to go forward. So as you can see, as you turn, you release straight up and down. Okay. So, I mean, ultimately, if we could just get momentum and propulsion hitting the front leg, then we'd have that energy to push up through the trunk and start transferring forward. I mean, the point is, the good news is that's a lot of velocity. Yeah. When you start throwing that trunk forward, all that velocity starts going, right? Okay, so as far as like your sense of timing and that letting the hips lead, that's good. I wouldn't say there's a lot of hip to shoulder separation, but there is some. You can see that's the hip peak and that's the trunk peak. So there is some separation, but notice how there's not really an acceleration. We should have that kind of a catapult effect. This should go here, the trunk should exponentially grow above that, right? That's just showing you there's not a lot of energy being transferred between. And that's that whole no propulsion, just rotation problem, right? And everything's stuck back. So like at release right here, if we look at like trunk orientation, I knew I was gonna do that. Crashes every time I do that.
Sam's going to be here for a couple months. Come over here for a minute? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll be staying with you too.
So if you look at pitch release right here, your trunk's 2 degrees back, an elite trunk would be 45 degrees forward. But once again, that's really your power mechanism. I mean, that's really the segment of the body that delivers the energy is the trunk. And you're really not even using it. So just imagine when you start using your trunk, right? So what drives the trunk is the lower half, because it's like what drives the meat of the whip is my arm moving the whip, right? If I just sat here and went like this, it wouldn't do anything. So the arm is your legs. You got to propel that center of mass. You got to propel that trunk forward. Okay. So, I mean, it's exciting. Yeah. Because there's so much you have on the table that you're not using here, and that's where a lot of velo would be. So I think just you starting to get, a good 15, 20 degrees, you'd probably be at 85 just at that point, right? Now you're gonna have to, there's a lot of motor control you're gonna have to learn. There's a lot of leg power you're gonna have to build. You're really gonna have to get uncomfortable with this to break out of this, but the med balls are really great at that. So I think there's a lot of promise here. But you definitely need to start learning how to get more power through your lower half. Okay? Mm-hmm. Not much more complicated than that.